At the upper end of a river valley, the road seems to be running out of land. The slopes draw closer, the air grows colder, and stone buildings gather beneath peaks that remain white long after winter has left the lowlands. One route enters through a deep mountain corridor, another crosses high country that snow can cover for much of the year. Along the horizon, the Greater Caucasus forms the northern edge of a nation. This is Ushguli, Georgia, in the region of Upper Svaneti. At roughly 2,200 meters above sea level, this small group of settlements stands near the headwaters of the Nguri River, between alpine valleys and the slopes below Shkhara, the country's highest summit. Here distance is not measured only in kilometers. It is measured in weather daylight road conditions and the amount of food or fuel that can be brought home before the next storm. The first clue to daily life is not a monument. It is a trail of footprints between a house and a stable and a resident carrying feed toward animals that cannot wait for the road to reopen. From a distance, its medieval towers make it look like a place preserved from another age. But the real story is not that time stopped here. It is that people continued living here while the world around them changed. Families still plan around livestock, hay-heat roads, and long winters. Some also run guest houses, answer online bookings, guide visitors, or return during the busy summer season. To understand how people live in Ushguli, we need to look beyond the snow and the towers. We need to see how a mountain community turns a short productive season into security for the months ahead, how old homes meet modern expectations, and how a village can be connected to the world online while physical access remains uncertain. In the middle of winter, the day does not begin with tourists or cameras. It begins with obligations close to home. A stable door opens. Cold air enters. Hay gathered months earlier is pulled down and divided among cattle or horses. The animals shift in the dim stable, their breath visible where warm air meets the cold. This is one of the quiet systems behind life in Ushguli. Summer grass becomes winter feed. A storage space becomes a measure of how safely a household can carry its livestock through the season. The work may appear repetitive, but it is never detached from the calendar. Every armful of hay connects a winter morning to decisions made in warmer months: when to cut, how long to dry it, where to store it, and how much will be needed before fresh grass returns. Outside movement follows the usable paths between homes, outbuildings, and the road. The village is not a single compact street, but a community of small settlements spread along the upper valley. Snow changes those distances. A short walk becomes slower, and a vehicle that would pass without notice in summer may become the most important sound of the day. Daily life is therefore built from small acts of timing. Work that depends on daylight is done while the light holds. Tasks involving water, fuel, animals, or supplies are not postponed simply because the weather is uncomfortable. Yet winter is not one continuous emergency. There are clear days, ordinary routines, conversations, meals, schoolwork, and moments when the mountains are simply the familiar view outside a window. That distinction matters. People here are not spending every hour fighting nature. They are living within a rhythm that requires more preparation, more flexibility, and a sharper awareness of what is available close at hand. The shape of that life can be seen inside the homes. The most famous buildings in Upper Svaneti are the tower houses, but a household is not a historical display. Across Ushguli, medieval stone structures stand beside houses altered or built during the Soviet period, newer guest rooms, balconies, sheds, and working farm spaces. The result is not a perfectly frozen village. It is a layered one. Historically, a traditional Svan house could place people and domestic animals on the ground floor, separated within a large hall, while an upper level stored fodder and tools and could be used by people in summer. The connected tower offered protection. That arrangement joined family life, livestock storage, warmth, and defense within one architectural system. Many present-day households live differently, but the relationship between home and work remains close. A family may keep animals, grow potatoes, or vegetables, prepare food, and accommodate guests within the same property. Older relatives may share the house with younger or middle-aged adults. Other family members live elsewhere for part of the year and return when summer brings work and visitors. This movement changes the size of the community with the seasons. Winter belongs mainly to those who stay year-round. Summer brings back relatives, seasonal operators, hikers, drivers, and guests. Rooms reopen. Horses are prepared for tours. Tables extend beyond the immediate family. Community here does not mean that everyone has the same interests or makes the same choices. Some households depend more heavily on farming. Others have invested in tourism. Some residents hold public jobs as teachers, police officers, or border guards, while also keeping livestock and hosting travelers. What connects them is the practical reality of living in a small place where private decisions quickly become part of the shared landscape. A repaired roof changes the view for a neighbor. A blocked road changes everyone's plans. A family that continues mowing pasture helps preserve not only its own animals, but the open cultural landscape around the village. Homework and community remain difficult to separate. Nowhere is that connection more visible than in Chazhashi, the part of the Ushguli community at the center of the UNESCO World Heritage Property. More than 200 medieval tower houses, churches, and castles have survived there. Their narrow profiles rise above stone walls and fields, turning the settlement into one of the most recognizable landscapes in the Caucasus. The towers are often presented as symbols of danger from the past. They did provide defense, and their tapering walls and protected connections show how seriously security was built into daily architecture. But they also reveal something less dramatic and more important. Life at high altitude demanded that storage animals, shelter, and family security be planned together. The beauty visitors see today grew from practical needs. Above Zhibiani stands Lamaria, the Ushguli Mother of God Church. The small basilica and its protective enclosure date to the 9th and 10th centuries, with layers of painting added over time. From the hill, the building looks outward toward the valley and Shkhara. For the community, it belongs not only to the photographed skyline, but to a religious and cultural landscape that remains present. Language carries another layer of continuity. Svan is distinct from Georgian, although residents commonly use Georgian as the national language. Svan remains a language of family and informal local conversation, part of a wider oral heritage carried through story and song. Yet the language is under pressure, which makes everyday use more significant than any formal display. Across Svaneti, polyphonic singing gives several voices separate lines that meet in a shared sound. Winter also includes Lamproba or Lampiari, a regional celebration associated with St. George. In communities where it is observed, people prepare wooden torches, gather, sing, and visit the graves of their ancestors. Its roots lie in community memory and faith, even though visitors may sometimes witness it. The celebration creates a bridge between households' remembrance and the turning of the season. Tradition in Ushguli is therefore not a costume worn over an unchanged past. It is a set of choices made in the present: which language is spoken at home, which building is repaired, which song is remembered, which gathering continues, and how a sacred place remains meaningful while appearing in thousands of photographs. The work that supports those choices is concentrated into a demanding seasonal cycle. When the snow retreats and grass returns to the slopes, livestock can move on to pasture. Fields and gardens require attention. Potatoes and other vegetables are grown where altitude, soil, and the short warm season allow. The months that look easiest to a visitor are often the months when the most must be accomplished. Haymaking shows why. Grass has to be cut, dried to the right level, gathered, transported, and stored before wet weather reduces its quality. On steep parts of Svaneti, large machines cannot do every job. Scythes are still used in places where the angle of the ground makes mechanized cutting impractical. The movement is deliberate, Cut, turn, wait, gather, carry. Weather decides how much time is available between each stage. Once the dried grass reaches the village, it is lifted into storage above or beside the spaces where animals will be kept. What appears to be a simple pile of hay is winter planning made visible. If the season produces too little feed, becomes an expense. If it is stored badly, months of labor can lose value. If it is managed well, cows, horses, or pigs remain part of the household economy after the pasture disappears beneath snow. But farming is no longer the only major source of income. Since around 2010, tourism has grown step by step in Ushguli. Many visitors arrive from Mestia, walk among the towers, continue toward the valley below Shkhara, and leave again the same day. Others finish the multi-day trail from Mestia and stay overnight. A smaller number remain long enough to see the village after the vehicles and day visitors have gone. For local families, tourism can turn spare rooms, cooking knowledge horses, and familiarity with the landscape into income. A year-round household may prepare breakfast and dinner, clean rooms, care for animals, grow food, and arrange transport within the same working day. In summer, younger relatives may help guide horse trips or communicate with foreign guests. What looks like a guest house from outside may still be a farm and a family home behind the sign. This creates an observational sequence very different from the postcard view. A guest arrives with a backpack. Boots are left near the entrance. A room is prepared. In the kitchen, food moves from a household task to paid hospitality. A horse may be saddled for a trip. At the same time, livestock still need feeding, and garden work cannot wait. By evening, the same table has served both family life and the visitor economy. Tourism brings opportunity, but it also competes with agriculture for labor and time. Hosting guests is physically demanding, yet it may produce income more directly than raising an animal and transporting its meat over mountain roads. Some households reduce agricultural work. Others combine the two because the farm, the food, and the lived landscape are part of what guests came to experience. Online platforms add another pressure. They allow a small homestay in the Caucasus to reach travelers around the world, but they also place local rooms beside thousands of others in an instant price comparison. Visitors may expect low prices and standard comforts without seeing the cost of transporting construction materials, food, or equipment to a remote high-altitude village. A review written in a few minutes can influence a season's income. The economy of Ushguli is therefore not divided neatly between old and new. A smartphone can receive a booking for a room beside a stable. Income from a summer guest may help cover education, medical needs, repairs, or winter supplies. A household's horse can remain part of farm life while also creating tourism income. The village continues because families combine whatever the mountain, the season, and the market make possible. Inside the house, the cost of distance becomes more personal. Heating is not an abstract utility when winter lasts for months. Without a natural gas connection, some households have relied on fuel-wood stoves for cooking or warmth. Wood must be obtained, moved, stored, and used carefully across a long, cold season. Electricity has not always been dependable. Low voltage or interruptions can turn an ordinary appliance into something that cannot be relied upon. A washing machine, a light, or a phone charger may work normally one day and become uncertain on another. That uncertainty adds labor. A task completed by a machine elsewhere may return to human hands here. Water service and pressure do not always match what a visitor expects from an urban hotel. Internet access has often depended on mobile connections rather than a fixed cable. Even when a phone can reach a booking platform, the connection may not be stable enough to manage every request easily. Then there is the price of everything that must arrive by road. Building materials, replacement parts, packaged food, fuel, and household goods carry the cost of the journey. A small repair can involve transport from Mestia or much farther away. For a guest, a room may seem inexpensive. For the family maintaining it, the margin can be very narrow. There is no single cost of living figure that explains Ushguli. Some households reduce cash expenses through potatoes, vegetables, dairy products, or livestock. At the same time, they need money for medicine, education, communications, repairs, and goods that cannot be produced locally. Living here depends on balancing household production with cash income and on preparing before access becomes difficult. That balance appears clearly in the kitchen. Flour spreads across a work surface. Dough is pressed and shaped. Chopped meat, onion, garlic, and spices are enclosed before the bread goes into the heat. When it returns, the crust has browned and the filling has released its aroma into the room. This is kubdari, the meat-filled bread closely associated with Svaneti. It is substantial food, but its meaning does not come only from calories. It brings together grain brought or grown through wider networks, meat connected to household livestock, and a seasoning tradition that gives Svan cooking its own character. Svan salt is not simply plain salt taken from a container. It is a coarse mixture commonly made with garlic and several herbs and spices. Recipes differ, and the precise balance can belong to a household. A small amount carries strong flavor into meat potato soups or other dishes. In a region where food has to work hard, seasoning also carries identity. Another dish begins with potatoes. They are boiled and mashed, then mixed over heat with cheese until the texture becomes thick, elastic, and rich. Tashmajabi turns two familiar mountain ingredients into food that is warm, filling, and meant to be shared while hot. Chivashtari brings cheese into cornbread, creating another compact combination of grain and dairy. These foods are often presented to travelers as a tasting list. In a household, the scene is more intimate. A pot is stirred, bread is divided. Cheese stretches as a spoon lifts it from the dish. People sit close enough to pass food by hand. The meal marks a pause between work already completed and work still waiting. Guest house tables have made Svan food part of the local tourism economy. Breakfast and dinner are commonly included because a room alone does not answer a traveler's needs in a small mountain settlement. Yet the table also exposes attention. Visitors may imagine complete self-sufficiency, while households actually combine local products with ingredients and supplies brought up the road. The food is genuine, not because every item came from a few meters away, but because it reflects how families use what the region produces and what connection to the wider country provides. In winter, a hot dish does more than create atmosphere. It gathers people around the warmest part of the house and turns stored ingredients into a shared interval of comfort. The mountains shape the meal, but the meal makes the mountains feel like home. Beyond the roofs, the scale widens again. Ushguli occupies the upper reaches of the Nguri Basin between the Caucasus and Svaneti ranges. Gorges narrow the routes into the community. Alpine valleys open around pasture. Above them, snowfields and glaciers feed the water system that runs away from the village toward lower country. Shkhara dominates the eastern horizon. Its presence can make the towers look small, but size is not the mountain's only influence. Elevation shortens the growing season. Snow controls access. Meltwater shapes rivers and slopes. Steep ground limits machinery and turns haymaking, building, and transport into negotiations with terrain. Summer changes the color of the system. White slopes give way to dark rock and green pasture. Livestock move farther from the buildings. Hikers follow trails toward the glacier. Families work outdoors for longer hours because the season offers light grass visitors and construction weather at the same time. Then the valley contracts again. Temperatures fall. Animals return closer to shelter. Stored fodder replaces pasture. The road becomes more vulnerable, and the towers stand above a landscape simplified by snow. This is why nature cannot be separated from culture in Ushguli. The settlement pattern, fields, towers, livestock, food, and seasonal economy all developed in response to the same terrain. The landscape is beautiful, but beauty is only its surface. Underneath it is a schedule that every household must read. For much of its history, that schedule included profound isolation. Today, Ushguli is connected by roads toward Mestia and Lenteki. The southern route toward Lenteki is mainly a warm season connection and can remain covered by snow through the colder part of the year. The road toward Mestia provides another link, but heavy snow avalanche danger or severe weather can still interrupt travel. Being cut off does not mean that every road is closed every day for a fixed number of months. It means access becomes conditional. A journey that is routine in clear weather can be delayed, restricted, or cancelled when conditions change. For residents, the practical question is not whether the village has a road on a map. It is whether that road can be used safely today. A vehicle entering the valley therefore carries more than passengers. It may bring food, medicine, fuel replacement parts, or building materials. On the return journey, it connects people to work, health services, education, and markets beyond the village. When the route stops, many other systems slow with it. At the same time, modern connection can arrive without a vehicle. A phone brings messages, weather information, social media, and reservations into a house surrounded by medieval towers. A guest can book from another continent. A younger family member can translate a request, advertise a room, or coordinate a ride. Images of Ushguli travel outward, even when the person who took them has already left. But digital connection has its own geography. Mobile data can be unstable or expensive. A host may use a phone as the internet connection for guests, then discover that the service expected as free has consumed a meaningful part of the booking income. If electricity is interrupted, the device that links the household to the market also becomes harder to charge. Roads and phones have not erased remoteness. They have changed its form. Ushguli is no longer outside the modern world. It is tied to that world through connections that can be valuable, fragile, and demanding at the same time. For younger people, those connections widen the number of possible futures. Education and specialized work often lead beyond the village. A community this small cannot provide every course, service, or profession. Leaving for a period may therefore be less a rejection of home than a practical step toward adulthood. Yet movement is not always permanent. Some young people return during summer when relatives need help and tourism creates work. Some guide horse trips or help communicate with foreign visitors, while families prepare rooms and manage online bookings. Others return for family reasons while keeping their main lives elsewhere. For those who remain or return, daily life does not fit a simple choice between tradition and modernity. A person can speak Svan at home, use Georgian in formal settings, answer an English message from a guest, care for livestock, and consider a future shaped by all four worlds. The difficult question is whether seasonal opportunity can become a stable life. Tourism income is concentrated in warmer months. Agriculture demands work but may provide limited cash. Internet and electricity can complicate remote study or online business. Housing and heritage need investment. A young adult deciding where to live must weigh attachment against services, income, and opportunity. No single answer represents an entire generation. Some will leave, some will return, some will divide their year between Ushguli and another place. What matters for the village is that departure does not automatically break the relationship. A language can still be spoken, a house maintained, a field mown, or a family business continued if the next generation sees a future in doing so. The clearest change of pace in Ushguli is not always the movement from morning to evening. It is the movement from one season to another. In summer, engines, hoofbeats, footsteps, and unfamiliar languages enter the valley. Guesthouse doors open repeatedly. Meals are prepared for larger tables. Horses carry visitors along routes local families know well. The village becomes both home and workplace under the gaze of strangers. As the season turns, the flow thins. The multi-day hikers disappear from the trail. Some relatives and seasonal operators leave. outdoor work shifts from growth and gathering towards storage and protection. The community becomes smaller, and social life draws closer to the households that remain. Winter changes social life rather than erasing it. Connection is often smaller and closer, food shared around a warm table, a visit between nearby homes, familiar voices, or work completed together because the task is easier with more than one pair of hands. These moments matter because life beyond work is part of what makes staying possible. A village cannot be sustained by efficiency alone. It also needs occasions when people are not serving guests, repairing buildings, or preparing for weather, when they are simply with those who understand the same road, the same language, and the same winter. Only after seeing those ordinary systems does the difficulty of life here come into proper scale. The first pressure is uncertainty. A medical journey that begins in the village may depend on road conditions far beyond anyone's control. Households can prepare supplies, but they cannot command the mountain. The second pressure is accumulated time. When heat, power, water, or communication becomes uncertain, basic tasks demand backup plans. Each interruption may appear small from a distance. Together they decide whether a room stays warm, a booking is received, or a student can connect to learning beyond the village. The third pressure is the cost of preserving the very landscape that attracts visitors. Medieval stone buildings require skilled repair. Transporting material is expensive. Heritage rules limit inappropriate changes for good reason, yet families still need safe roofs, usable rooms, water, and modern sanitation. New construction can provide income, but it can also alter the character that made Chazhashi and Upper Svaneti internationally important. Tourism adds a social challenge. Visitors often arrive looking for an untouched world. They may photograph a resident feeding cattle as though ordinary work were a public performance. For the person in the picture, the village is not scenery. It is private life taking place in a destination other people have come to consume. Ushguli has also lived through depopulation. Extreme winter events and organized resettlement in the late 1980s drove many people away. Later, economic hardship continued the movement. Tourism has encouraged some return, but the permanent community remains much smaller than the number of people who may be present in summer. None of these pressures makes Ushguli a place of helpless victims, nor should difficulty be polished into a romantic story of endless strength. The reality is more demanding. Families make compromises. They combine incomes. They postpone repairs, invest in rooms, keep animals, support education beyond the village, return for summer, or decide that remaining year-round still matters enough to accept the cost. Why then does home still matter here? The answer begins with the details that would be easy to overlook. It is knowing how much hay remains without counting every bundle. It is recognizing the sound of a vehicle on the road and understanding what its arrival may mean. It is speaking in words shaped by this valley, entering a church that has stood above generations of family memory and looking toward Shkhara without needing to treat the mountain as a landmark. Home is also practical knowledge. A resident knows which work must be finished before rain, where animals can move safely, how a stove behaves, which road conditions should not be trusted, and who is nearby when help is needed. That knowledge has value because it reduces uncertainty in a place where uncertainty is part of the environment. For families who host travelers, staying gives the village more than beds for the night. It keeps pastures in use, animals in the landscape, food being produced, houses maintained, and local stories attached to the buildings where they belong. Without year-round residents, the towers might remain impressive, but the cultural landscape around them would become something different, a collection of structures rather than a lived community. The wish to remain does not cancel the desire for better roads, dependable power, education, healthcare, or fair income. People do not have to reject modern comfort to prove that they belong. In fact, better connection may be what allows belonging to continue. That is the quiet paradox at the center of Ushguli. The village must change enough to support the people who live here, but not so carelessly that change removes the relationships between homes, fields, animals, towers, language, and memory. Its future depends neither on sealing it away nor turning it entirely toward visitors. It depends on making ordinary life possible. The footprints between the house and the stable now mean more than they did at the beginning. They are a small path inside a much larger decision to keep returning to the work knowledge and relationships that make this valley home. From above, Ushguli can still appear almost unreal. Stone towers rise through snow. The villages sit beneath a wall of mountains. A road follows the river until distance, and weather make every connection look fragile. But living here is not an unbroken struggle against winter. It is a year organized around seasons: grass, cut before the cold animals cared for, after pasture disappears, rooms opened when visitors arrive, food shared when work pauses, and modern tools fitted into a landscape built by older needs. The people of Ushguli do not preserve this place by standing still. They preserve it by continuing to use it, by adapting houses, maintaining fields, speaking, cooking, hosting, leaving when necessary, and returning when possible. Snow may close a road, it does not close the life behind it. And beneath Shkhara, among the towers of Upper Svaneti, that life continues not as a performance of survival, but as home. If you would like to discover more communities shaped by extraordinary landscapes, continue with another film in our 4K travel documentary playlist.